Little souvenir from David here.
Is that his luxury item?
That's his luxury item. Who wants to play?
I totally will play.
Not me.
Not me.
No one wants to play.
No energy. David, he's a football fanatic. Had no more use for his football. And, on his way out, he threw me his football. I just wish I had the energy to throw it around. The food situation out here is really rough. We've got rice that we're starting to really conserve, 3 cups a day. So my energy level is really low. I'm just putzing along in first gear. It's amazing how it depletes my strength and my endurance. Please. I'm gonna lay down and take a nap, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve doesn't really look like he has a lot of energy to do much, let alone toss around a football. David kind of tossed it to Steve and said, have fun, but I don't know if Steve's used it yet. So we'll see how much that gets used. It might get used more as a pillow.
I tell you, my 13 years in the NFL was nothing compared to how tough and demanding that 31 days out here in Nicaragua in the wilderness and surviving off of rice and sleepless nights. A lot of growth came out of it. I learned a lot. All in all, really enjoyed the whole Survivor experience.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Hey there, what's going on, everybody? It's your pal Tim Hanlon, and it is Good Seats Still Available. Say it with me, the curious little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. Thanks for finding us. We appreciate it. And to be honest with you, in that clip, I'm not sure if our guest this week, Steve Wright, truly enjoyed his time. If you look at the video from his appearance in the Survivor series on CBS, Redemption Island, that version, that was the 2011 spring season of Survivor Redemption Island. Steve Wright was one of the later cast-offs from that year's episode. But you look at the video from that season 22 of that show, and Steve Wright, our guest, was, you could say, maybe almost emaciated looking. This is a professional football player, as we'll find out in our conversation coming up, who lost, I think, 30, 35 pounds, maybe even a little bit more. And you could hear sort of in his voice, he was already kind of losing strength. And I guess it was about 30 days in to that series' visit to Nicaragua, San Juan del Sur, I think it was. That's just a brief glimpse into one part of the life of our guest, Steve Wright, this week. You may know him from that Survivor Redemption experience. You also may know him in the business world as the founder of Cloudburst, which is a still used today sideline mist cooling system that was developed at post his NFL football career. But of course, for people like us, we are obsessed with any excuse to get into various teams and leagues and memories thereof from situations and those kinds of things that are no longer with us in professional sports. And Steve Wright has plenty of those. You may know his professional football career spanned from the Dallas Cowboys in 1981 through the Los Angeles Raiders till through 1993. In between stops in the places like the Baltimore Colts. And he was part of the transition, Steve was, between the Baltimore and Indianapolis Colts, the great sort of midnight steal, if you will, of that team and that move. We get into a conversation around that. The Oakland Invaders make an appearance. Steve was part of that team in 1985. The USFL Championship Game appearing Oakland Invaders. We talk about that. And the bulk of Steve's career on the offensive line, his position was offensive line, various offensive tackle positions, left and right sides. was spent with the Los Angeles version of the Raiders from 1987 to 1993. All kinds of stars on that team, like Marcus Allen and Todd Christensen and Howie Long and all kinds of stuff. We get into all that too. So that is the focus of our conversation with our guest this week, Steve Wright, not only the Survivor Redemption participant for quite some time, but an amazing and relatively long career for the NFL these days on the offensive line of all those teams, both NFL and USFL. And that's our chat. And the excuse is a brand new book that he has written, co-written with his wife, Lizzie. It's called Aggressively Human, Discovering Humanity in the NFL, Reality TV, and Life. And it's a very interesting, almost Renaissance-like man type of life and career that Steve Wright has had. And that book you can get. It's a very compelling read. Lots of great little stories about the NFL and USFL football, but also after the fact too, what one does after a professional football career. Not always the easiest thing, as most pro athletes will tell you, when sometimes by design or more often than not, all of a sudden, one's career comes to an end in professional sports. Again, it's called Aggressively Human, Discovering Humanity in the NFL, Reality TV, and Life. It is published by Kohler Books, and it is available, like most of our books are, or other forms of media that our guests may be promoting, on our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Just search up this episode number. Gee, what number is it? I think it's number one. No, it's 326. My goodness, I forget how many we've done over the years. Our episode with Steve Wright, 326. Just look that up on the website, and you'll find a convenient link or two to the Aggressively Human book. You can get it in hardcover version. You can get it in paperback. You can get it in Kindle form, and it's also available in Audible audiobook form. All kinds of formats and editions to get for Aggressively Human, the book by Steve Wright. Our guest this week, let's get to it, shall we? It's a fun conversation, an intriguing one, a very interesting one. And let's check off a couple of boxes, a bunch of teams we haven't talked about yet in this crazy little show. Here's our conversation we had with Steve about 2 weeks back. Please, as always, enjoy. First of all, why don't you, for our audience, give us a bit of your professional football background first, for those who don't know, or perhaps maybe do remember. You had quite the career in the 80s, in particular, early 90s as well. You were absolutely in the midst of some crazy times in the National Football League.
Yeah, I was really fortunate. I came out of college in '81 as a free agent, signed with the Dallas Cowboys, one of 120 free agents. That year, 3 of us made it. Hung in there with the Raiders with the Cowboys for a couple more years, and then was traded to the Baltimore Colts, and spent the last year that the Colts were in Baltimore with them. And then went with them in the middle of the night to Indianapolis. The greatest move ever for the Colts. I just, it still amazes me what a sharp move that was. And then trying to renegotiate with the Colts after my 4-year contract was up, and the USFL came calling with a wheelbarrow full of money, and signed with the Michigan Panthers. And just my luck, at this, I think about the same day or the very next day, they merged with the Oakland Invaders. And so those contracts were just merged into a Oakland Invader contract, and I landed out there in Oakland, and we were in the championship game. The league folded. My head coach, Charlie Sumner, had been the defensive coordinator with the LA Raiders for the previous 10 years. They brought him back. And he brought myself and Anthony Carter down to Los Angeles, and I made the team there and hung in there for 7 years until I retired in '94.
Well, I mean, so that's there are so many different things that we're going to unpack from all of that, right? So let's back up then. Your main position, you were largely on the offensive line, offensive tackle, right? For most of your career.
Correct.
Correct. Was that also in high school and college? And how did you evolve as a football player? When did you know, when you were growing up, that maybe you had what it took to potentially go to the pro level? And even embedded in that, going to a college that wasn't really necessarily on the major collegiate football radar, and getting into the NFL without being drafted.
Yeah, it's a whole lot in there, but it's a great question. I played tight end in high school. I received a full scholarship to go to University of Northern Iowa, and played tight end there my freshman year. Sophomore, junior year, they moved me to offensive line and then put me back out at tight end my senior year. Sprained my ankle, I think about the sixth game, and really sprained it bad and missed the last 4 games of the year. And so subsequently, I think that may have had something to do with possibly me missing the draft, or at least that's my excuse why I didn't get drafted, which turned out to be a huge blessing. And then landed with, the Cowboys and just got stuck in the line. But I did move around from right to left side. Out here with the Raiders, I got stuck at center a couple times. Played both guards, and always played tight end on short yards and goal line.
How do you miss the draft, and then how do you get on the attention of the Cowboys after the draft? Like, what's that scenario like?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, in high school, I was just really surprised that I was just having a ball playing football, and then all of a sudden I started getting scholarship offers, and it just blew me away. So I signed with UNI, and then I hadn't really thought much about the pros. There was no way I was going to make the pros. I wasn't even all conference in my college. So kind of one thing led to another, and just ended up in Dallas.
Well, hold on a second. See, that doesn't magically happen. I mean, look, the early '80s, right? The Cowboys were like, there was America's team. It was pretty much being cemented. Like, you must have gotten on the radar somehow for something unique.
Yes, I had Seattle, and I had Cleveland Browns and a couple other teams showing interest. And it was just as a free agent. Again, I wasn't even all conference, so I wasn't a star by any means.
So you were doing tryouts and stuff and workouts and all that kind of stuff, getting on people's radars that way, or had you been scouted somehow?
Yeah, they didn't have that back then. There was no combine or anything. It's just I had my choice of where to sign. After the draft, I was at a party and I didn't get drafted, and so I ended up back to my house. And a guy from the Cleveland Browns and the Cowboys were sitting there on my step, like just waiting for me. And they said, "Who do you want to sign with?" And that's how simple and archaic it was. And so I said, "I want to go with Dallas." We went to the guy's hotel room and signed a little 3-year contract. And they brought in, back then, they brought in 120 free agents. I don't know what the free agency is now, how many guys they bring into camp, but 120 is a whole boatload. And yeah, and just 3 of us made it. I had five other roommates in training camp, and they all disappeared. And I spent the last 2 or 3 weeks in my 6-bed room by myself. And it was just my thing has always been, and I preach this all the time, is just fighting like hell and staying focused for the very next day. We would sit around in the room with these 5 other rookies trying to make the team, and these guys were all worried about the preseason game against the 49ers or whoever it was going to be coming up that weekend, and it was Monday or Tuesday. I just thought about the next morning's practice. We had 2 practices a day. I wasn't even thinking about the afternoon practice. All I could think about and focus on was the morning practice. And then like to say, there's 10 drills or something in the morning practice that we always go through. And I didn't even think of the next 9. My focus was just on the very next one and just doing the best I could, because I know you could get cut right away. Which guys were getting cut every day, multiple players. And so it was just all I could do was be the very best I could be for that drill. And then after you get through all that, then the weekend finally comes. But all these guys that were thinking way out ahead and kind of saving themselves a little bit for the big scrimmage coming up, the preseason game or something, or maybe it was just a scrimmage, those guys all disappeared. So it's just, I learned somehow, and I'm not sure how it is, but stay really in the now. It sounds, it's such a cliche word now. Back then, I don't really remember anybody really talking about it, but I somehow found it, and it kept me focused on what needed to be taken care of right then.
Was it also maybe a little of like you didn't know what you didn't know, like meaning you didn't have any sort of preconceptions, you hadn't been drafted. It's kind of like might as well I'll do my best and see where the chips land.
Yep, 100%. And just whatever it is, and that's the theme of my book, is just plow through any cracked door. If it's business or an opportunity to play for the Dallas Cowboys, I figured I could always end up, and I didn't know the difference, but if I stayed with the Cowboys long enough and I got cut the 3rd or 4th week, that I could still go to any other team, which I don't think that was true, but that was my thinking. So just give it hell as long as I can, and then I made it.
Yeah, you say you have a little anecdote in the book, sort of how you sort of took it, or you're, let's put it this way, you didn't necessarily anticipate it when you were being called into the room.
Say that. I'm sorry.
You were not necessarily expecting per se that you were going to make the final cut for the team.
I didn't believe it, and I just we broke camp, and I was back just waiting in a hotel room, pacing, and I talk all about it in my book, the first chapter, just pacing a trench in my room and outgoing calls only to family and friends for support. And then I got an incoming call from a guy named Gil Brandt, who messed with me on the call, said he really appreciated, my effort and thanked me a lot. And it sounded like I was on my way out. And he said, "Hey, just want to tell you, congratulations, you are now a Dallas Cowboy." And I just exploded. For just a guy coming out of Northern Iowa, also, too, on top of that, the number 1 and number 3 draft picks that year were offensive linemen. It was the first time they ever kept 11 offensive linemen. They couldn't get rid of me. I was just hustling and doing everything they needed. I got some fun stories in there of elaborating on that, where I saved a timeout in a preseason game on the punts. Everybody was, Danny White was out getting ready to punt, and guys are still trying to make the team. And Danny White is getting ready to punt, and he's counting, and he's only got 9 guys in front of him. He's missing somebody. He starts waving his arm, and nobody's moving. The coaches are all looking around trying to figure out who it is. That wasn't my position. I didn't know what to do. I just bolted onto the field. Kind of crazy, when you really think about it. But just jumped into the hole, and they told me who to block, and Danny got his punt off, and I came back, and man, I had more slaps on my back, and way to go. And it was just being alert and hustling and ready to do anything to help the team.
And your rookie season was a pretty darn good season for the Cowboys. They were playoffs and all that kind of stuff. And obviously they were, this is a legendary Tom Landry, reign, if you will. And how much action did you see? And you did a lot of special team stuff mostly, right? Versus being on the offensive side, right?
Yeah. So I think we finished the year 12-4. We were playing up in Minneapolis on the first Monday night game at the new Metrodome in it was January, I think it was January of 82. And it was just freezing outside, and we're returning the kickoff, which the team I'm on, and we fumbled the ball on the half-yard line. And so I'm coming off the field, and my offensive line coach meets me halfway and says, "Hey, take that right guard spot." Kurt Peterson, the regular, his shoe came off, and he couldn't get it back on. So he's stumbling around, and he ended up trotting off. I went in, and there was a timeout. It was Monday Night Football. There was a timeout, and so I'm standing there in the huddle as the youngest guy in the huddle. I've got 35 tickets right there in between the goalposts in the end zone, 3 rows up, my neighbors, my buddies I went to high school with, my parents. And I'm looking, and there's Drew Pearson in the huddle with me, who 4 years earlier, I'm sitting at the Met before they built the stadium, and it's snowing and probably 20 degrees below zero. It was the NFC Championship game, and Drew Pearson caught what's coined as the Hail Mary to beat the Minnesota Vikings to go to the Super Bowl.
Sure, remember
and
that
now
game very well. Sure.
And, yeah, and I'm in 10th grade. So now 4 years later, there's a dome, Monday Night Football, and I've got Drew Pearson and Tony Dorsett as my teammates. And I'm 21 years old. It's just it's mind-boggling, and I go into great length in this story of just it's an out-of-body experience. It was I'm looking at my family, I'm giving thumbs up, and Danny White called a play just to get us a couple of yards. Danny for Tony Dorsett to run up the middle just to get a few yards, and Tony ran between me and the center for 99.5 yards. And so we all run down there and come off the field, and the right guard took his position. So I was only in for one offensive play, and it went right into the Hall of Fame. But yes, in many other games, the Cowboys were so dominant. Like out here, we were playing the Rams, and I got thrown in against Jack Youngblood. And it just pretty much got my ass handed to me. I think I got 2 holding calls. But I'm 21, just hanging on to Jack for dear life. So I got quite a bit of playing time for a young guy. But then when I got traded, it was really a blessing in disguise. I got to move right into the Baltimore Colts starting lineup from being a backup the previous 2 years, and I would have probably most likely stayed a backup for a few years. So it was, I was really bummed at the time, but it turned out to be perfect. It was just, it couldn't have lined up any better to get to Baltimore and start getting some serious playing time in.
All right. Well, before we go to the Charm City, I want one question on Dallas. In the book, it does seem like you had a pretty good time being a Cowboy, not necessarily always on the field per se, but certainly off the field. Arguably, you could not have picked a better team to kind of be initiated, shall we say, into the NFL, right? It wasn't a Cleveland, for that matter.
Yeah, that was. I tell some pretty wacky stories of being 21 years old playing for America's team. And it's the early 80s, and the show Dallas was just kicking off. It was big cars, big hair, big wallets. Everybody would be out in the clubs, and that's a bad place to put a 21-year-old with a pocket full of money. And I bought a Cadillac convertible, cowboy blue with a white top, and got the gold chain, and looking pretty silly. And but yeah, I had the time of my life, and thank God I made it through, and got to Baltimore, and there was nothing to do there. So I think I slept for the next 6 months and played football.
Do you remember anything about the player strike in '82, your second and final season with the Cowboys? Like, what was that like? And did you play any of those Players Association games that were done in between while the strike was going on and stuff?
To be honest with you, I don't remember those. But
most people don't. That's why we're here. But yeah, there were 2 exhibition games that the Players Association put on, and then they had to cancel them because nobody was watching them.
Yeah, no, I didn't play in those. I was walking the picket line. Now I had my placard over my head and walking the picket line. But no, I don't remember a whole lot from that. I didn't bring that up in the book. I talked more about the '87 strike out here in Los Angeles. But I think we did. We had a few basketball games that Drew Pearson, some of the guys invited me to, and so we were staying active. Away from the practice facility.
All right. Well, tell us how you indeed do get to Baltimore. You have a pretty interesting little anecdote in the book that kind of sort of tells that story, but also maybe a little bit of a lesson learned as you found out. You want to tell us how you found out, but from whom, and
Sure.
what you were thinking of, what you were going into when Baltimore was the place you were told you were going.
Yeah, it was the 4th preseason game. We're at pregame meal with Dallas, and I'm just finishing and had noticed that Landry was just walking around. And I finished eating, and as soon as I put my fork down, I'll never forget, he just leaned over my shoulder and said, "Hey, Steve, take a walk with me." And I looked across I was just looked at everybody, and I went, because everybody knew that something had to happen. It was between myself and one or two other guys that were looking to get traded, just caught up in the numbers. And Butch Johnson, one of the wide receivers there, he just dropped his paper and looked over the top of it. And I'll never forget him closing his eyes. He was crushed too and just shook his head and then lifted his paper back up, and I about threw up. And so I got up and I went for a walk with Landry, and he said, and it was just a real short conversation. It was 2 minutes. He said, "Steve, we just made a trade with you to the Baltimore Colts, and you've got a flight today at 1:00. And I think it was probably 8:00 in the morning. I just said, "What? You can't even, I don't have time to go home and get a pair of clothes, a change of clothes." So I negotiated to fly out at 4:00 instead of 1:00, and did everything I possibly could do, shutting off the electricity to the house and saying goodbye to friends and packing as much as I could, and jumped on a plane for Baltimore and did my little song and dance stories to all the flight attendants, and they felt bad for me and kept feeding me bottles of, the little bottles of vodka. And so I sucked down a few of those. And it's honestly the first time and only time in my life I've ever gotten drunk, just because I felt so crummy and crushed, leaving America's team for the Baltimore Colts, really? It was a crusher. So then I got to the hotel and stumbled around in there, and it turned out we all sucked together, but we had fun together. It was a really tight knit family of guys that I was fortunate to play with. We had what I consider the worst coach, ever, in Frank Cush. I just
I'll let people buy the book and get some of those insights, but please don't let me stop you.
Yeah, he was just an inferior man that had a big chip on his shoulder and didn't know how to deal with men. He was used to screaming at young kids, and that's what always bugged me when college coaches call these guys kids, and they're 18 years or they're 19, 20 years old, and they're big men, and they're calling them kids. But that's what he was used to, dealing with kids. And so the other coaches didn't respect them, and we made the most of it, though.
But the playing environment, the stadium, the fans, the competitiveness of the team. I guess you went 7-9 that first season that you were there. And perhaps, what about rumors of the team leaving? Did you know any of that first season?
No, there was no rumors. The season finished up. The stadium was just a drag to play in. It was so old, and I've got it in my book here. They called it the largest outdoor insane asylum. There was probably 20, maybe 30% filled, and the ones that were there were rowdy and throwing drinks. And my parents flew out for a game, and we were going to go to dinner, and I met them out in the parking lot, and they were just, you could tell they had beers thrown at them, and it was pretty miserable. But where's I going with that thought?
Baltimore. It's a bit of a different experience than what you were used to, the carpet and the palace that was Texas Stadium.
Yeah, and then you had asked about rumors, and no, none of us had heard a thing about it. And then I was back at my house in Dallas and watching, I think it was ESPN at the time, and it came on that the Baltimore Colts had moved. They weren't moving; they moved to Indianapolis, and I still had my apartment back there with all my things. And I was like, what? So I had to get back there and rent a U-Haul and dump everything in there and then drive it over to Indianapolis. And
wait a minute. You're on the roster. This is off season. This is in the winter, I think it was, right? Sometime in the winter. I remember the vivid Mayflower moving trucks vividly on the television. And you didn't know? Nobody gave you a heads up? Nobody knew?
No, nobody said a word. Yeah, it was. My jaw dropped, and when I was sitting in my home in Dallas, I couldn't believe it. It's just, I didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but it was a shocking thing that we were moving, and my time in Baltimore was over.
All right, let me talk to you about DraftKings Sportsbook. Hey, there's so much to be thankful for this holiday season. Family, friends, food, and of course, NFL football all week long. DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping your Thanksgiving week full of action. New customers can bet just $5 on the NFL action to score $150 instantly in bonus bets. Hey, no matter the appetite, there's something for you. Money lines, parlays, props, live bets, and so much more. You name it, they've got it. And look, there are a whole bunch of different NFL games, including maybe it's that Dolphins-Jets game on Prime Video, that Friday afternoon, Black Friday game in the afternoon at the Meadowlands. And maybe the Jets will actually surprise and come out from the darkness and defeat Miami after their hot start. Who knows what the line is going to be on that by the time you hear this, but one of just many, many games that you can play on DraftKings Sportsbook. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the code GOODSEATS, and all new customers can bet $5 on the NFL Thanksgiving action to score $150 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports, he says, betting partner of the NFL, and using that code GOODSEATS. Again, that's DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. Please play responsibly. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling by calling 888-789-7777 or visiting ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. Must be 21 or older in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms. And now, back to our conversation. So what happens? I mean, like methodically, what do you do? Do you get on the phone? You try to verify it's true? Do you? What do you? I mean, does the organization reach out to you or what? I mean, it just seems nuts.
Yeah, I don't remember the details, but I'm sure I talked to somebody back there, and they said, "Yeah, we're out of here. We're in Indianapolis, so do what you got to do to, get settled into a new place here in Indy." And they didn't know I had an apartment still sitting there and ready to go with all my furniture that I'd probably rented. And so, yeah, we went back there and loaded up. And yeah, it was a secret to everybody. It was just the best kept secret ever. And especially it was so smart for the Ursays to load up and move out because, like I said, there's, 20 to 30% capacity. They hated it at Colts. I used to, just for fun, if I was sitting in a bar and I had a couple guys on each side of me and whatever, watching a game or something or having a beer, I'd say something like, "Man, what do you guys think of the Colts?" or something. And they'd say, "Oh, man, they suck." And I'd just say, "How about that Steve Wright, that new kid that came from Dallas? What do you think of him? He kind of sucks, doesn't he?" Yeah, and nobody knew who you were. They didn't like the Colts. And I just did it just to see how they felt about the Colts. And they'd say, "Oh, the Colts suck." And there was just no support. They hated the Ursays. And so Robert Ursay goes from, 30,000 seat, 20,000 people at the game to go to Indianapolis. And I think he pays $1 rent for the next 10 years and it packs the place. And the money just starts pouring in. And, then he's got Peyton Manning and a Super Bowl. And yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. And he had to do it.
Yeah, he sounds like a real winner of an owner, though, right? I'm not sure the players necessarily. Well, you tell me. How did they feel about him as the owner, and how did they feel about being sort of in the middle of this situation, not of their own doing?
Yeah, I don't think anybody was real warm and cuddly towards him nor him towards them. I never had an issue with him because I carried a contract from the Cowboys, and so I never had to deal with them until the very end when we were in Indianapolis. And it just, I could tell right away it wasn't happening. I actually wasn't dealing with him. I was dealing with Ernie Kosar. I think his name was Ernie. I can't believe I just pulled that name up. Ernie Kosar was the president of the Colts. And I dealt with him and just not even close to what I was looking for. And then on top of that, just with the USFL, just throwing money around.
Well,
it was a super easy decision. Nobody respected Robert Irsay.
Well, you were getting playing time. That was good, right? And that was arguably what you were talking about, right? You're proving yourself. I mean, you played both of those seasons, right?
Yeah. Yes, I did, and it just really helped my ability, and obviously got the attention of the USFL, and so yeah, it was an easy decision. And after the team moved, I was traded to Baltimore, and then without me knowing it, the carpet gets pulled out, and I end up in Indianapolis. Wait a minute, I got to start looking out for myself, and so I signed with the Invaders, and then go out to Los Angeles, and the first thing is a strike. And so I'm walking the picket line out there with everybody for whatever, I don't know, the first 30 days or something, and guys are disappearing. We're all working out together in El Segundo, and guys just started disappearing. So I split, and I went over to see my parents in Phoenix which was going to be a couple of days. And as soon as I got over there, my first afternoon, we were just sitting down to dinner. Al Locasal called right in the middle of dinner and said, "Hey, Al wants you back here." And it's basically to come in as a scab. But he wants you to come back right now, and he's going to up it 25%. He's going to guarantee so-and-so. And I said, "Great. That's awesome." I said, "I'm having dinner here with the folks. I just want to kind of get away from it. I'll call you tomorrow." He goes, "Oh." So I hung up. 5 minutes later, he calls back and says, "Steve, Al's pissed now. He's going to guarantee 50% of it. He's going to put raise your contract up to this, but you got to get back here." And I said, "Great. I really appreciate it." And this is honest truth. I said, "I will call you back in the morning," and which I was really going to do. And I just didn't want to talk about it. It was dinner time, and I was sitting there with my parents who I hadn't seen in a while. So I hung up. He calls back and says, "Steve, this is it. Al's guaranteeing 100% of the contract, and he's moving it up to this, but you got to be back here for practice in the morning." And I write about this in the book. And I said, "Listen to this." And I dropped my fork and let him hear it. And I said, "I'm on the next plane." And drove out to the airport, flew back to Los Angeles, drove into the El Segundo facility there, and a couple of guys were walking around. Mike Hayes was one of them, Mike Haynes. And Mike stood in front of my car, and I was just like, "Dude, I'm coming in, I hope you move out of the way." And so I was one of the first scabs to, of the players. They had other, the games going on, but this is when the floodgates opened. And that afternoon, because it was, you could tell just from the media and everything else, it was breaking. And so I went in the morning, and that afternoon, Howie and Mike Haynes and just the whole team came back in. So this is where I had to look out for myself after whatever it was, 45 days of being on strike. I had to take care of myself at that point. But then I knew it was going to break. So everybody comes in, and I was the only one in that locker room. And I was the only one in that locker room that had a 100% guaranteed contract from what I believe. And I jacked my salary up. And these guys, came in 3 hours after I did. So I just, I had to look out for myself at that point.
Well, look,
and it paid off.
That happens a lot of times when strike scenarios happen. But let me back up for a second. So we'll get back to the Invaders for a sec in a minute, because I don't want to sort of completely forget that blip. But so tell me, you have a contract with the Raiders as an actual roster player. And the players go on strike. This is 1987.
Yeah.
And I guess it was the third week of the season or so. And yet you are you become a replacement player? I mean, was that literally?
I was going to be.
Okay.
I was all set to be a replacement player as long as they paid me what they said they were going to pay me. I was dead set to be called a scab and everything else at that point.
Didn't that? I mean, okay. So, but isn't that okay? I don't remember the scenario and the situation all that clearly, but doesn't that put you in an awkward position? I mean, how does that? How do you?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So,
But
how common was that thought process?
I was in an awkward position when I finished my meal, and Tom Landry said, "Hey, we traded you and you're gone in 4 hours." And I was in an awkward position when I'm sitting in Dallas watching ESPN, and I see that my team that was in Baltimore is now in Indianapolis. And then I was in an awkward position when I wasn't getting anywhere near what I deserved with the Colts in Indianapolis. So I go out to Oakland to play for the Invaders, and I'm set with a really juicy 3-year contract. And then I get that taken away from me because the league folds. So now you got to look out for yourself. Sure, I'm a team guy to the core more than I would say, almost anybody I can think of. Live and die for the team. But at some point, you got to look out for yourself. And so, yeah, there was awkward moments with not just me, but between a lot of players. There was a lot of during practice, there was a lot of little scuffles out on the field, and everybody was pissed because I think there was probably some other scabs, some other guys that were players that were out there too. I just remember there was just a lot of friction that year.
Well, so you played a bunch of replacement games though, right?
No, I played, I think it was like 1 or something like that,
Okay.
But I played it with everybody else.
Got it. Right. Okay. So this is you and us. So this was okay. So this in essence, this wasn't like, this is sort of a built up sort of scenario where certain players, I guess, had sort of very similarly maybe thought, hey, you know what, we got to eventually start to like you look out for ourselves here per se, and arguably weakens the strike movement, I guess, which to the detriment perhaps of the Players Association. But yeah, I mean, these are human beings, right? These are players who may or may not have great contract situations like you essentially did at the time. More tenuous, maybe hadn't gone through some of those situations that you had earlier in your career that wizened you up.
Right.
It's got to be very, very challenging on players who already know that they're part of a business and it's not necessarily in their control.
Right on, Tim. You're hitting it right on the head because I'm here. I'm 28 years old and I just landed in Los Angeles and basically got my contract doubled and guaranteed. It was like I would have gone out and played with third graders, if I had to. I had a good chunk of money that nobody else really had, the guaranteed contract. So I was ready to take care of Steve. Steve had been walking the picket line for 30-something days out in front of the El Segundo offices, and it's 2 floors. And the second floor, Al Davis would always stand up there and watch the guys picket in front. I'm a new guy on the team. All those other guys had been there for years. And their number 1 draft pick was an offensive lineman, John Clay. He's out there walking too. And it just, at some point, and he's disappearing. So I'm out there and I'm not going to drop any names, but they all disappeared. And I'm the new guy on the block and I'm still out there pacing around. Finally, after about the 30th day, I said, screw this. I'm going to go chill out for a little bit because this is going to go on. But then when I got back, things started kind of happening fast to where the union was going to be broken. And I said, shit, what the heck? I'm going to take this money and go back in. And then just by chance, it did break and everybody else came back in.
So there were no repercussions against you then per se, or was there tension coming back, or was it because of that unique situation in that you were sort of near maybe the end of the strike, if you will, almost unwittingly, and there were others that were kind of going along with that eventuality at the same time? Because I would imagine under regular strike circumstances, right? it would not be that accommodating when you came back.
Yeah, probably not. But again, it's, yeah, sure, there was natural tensions among all the players that year. I don't remember. I think we had a losing season. I think we were under 500%, I think. But yeah, there was a lot of tensions in the locker room and on the field. But the only thing I know is, I was happy as a lark. I had the bank. I was a new guy in Los Angeles, and I was going to give it hell for the team. No matter what the players were, if it was Howie out there or Joe Blow playing his position. I knew it was going to break at some point, and I was going to take my guaranteed money. I'd been, that was what, my 6th or 7th year. So I was, and I struggled with contracts at multiple places and traded and moves, and nobody cared for Steve. You learn early that you're a product. And so this product was going to take care of himself. Team, I'd say probably, to be honest with you, myself first, but team right there with it. I was going to do everything I can for the team, and I always did. And that's what everybody's always remembered me as, is just a good team player, cool with everybody and a fighter, and someone that I totally dislike maybe on the team. If they're in a fight, I'm coming over the top of the back of them to take down anybody else that's, getting after one of my guys, no matter who they are.
So you spent the most amount of time in your pro career with the Raiders in Los Angeles. Well, you're talking about some players. Maybe tell me some players that you hung around with that some of us might remember. You mentioned Howie. I mean, that's Howie Long, of course.
Yeah.
What was it like playing in LA as the Raiders? Because that was an interesting period of time. Being in the Raider organization was always interesting, right? No, make no mistake what city it was located in, but it was also this sort of, I don't know, second thought of, it was a second team in Los Angeles, and then it was the only team for a while, and there was always that Oakland thing that was before and after, and frankly, the culture of LA at that time, right? It was explosively.
Sure was.
Right, and you obviously you were in the years prior to that, right? But the Raiders were not necessarily. They were a rough and tough team.
Yeah, I mean, you had Gretzky coming down here with the Kings, and it was Showtime with Magic and Jabbar and Cooper, and so we'd get through with practice and and drive over to the stadium there and go watch a basketball game and have great seats and do whatever we want to do. Yeah, you're spot on with. It was an amazing time in Los Angeles. Yeah, just playing. I practiced every day. I practiced against Howie Long, who just made me a better player, and we hung out a little bit. I always really put an effort into, and I guess it really wasn't conscious, just kind of getting away from the guys to go do my own thing. I had other buddies there that maybe from college or guys I had met. And so I lived down in Hermosa Beach, and a lot of the players lived around Manhattan or Hermosa Beach, but I always kind of just enjoyed getting away and doing something different, getting away from the football mentality. I did go on plenty of things, Thursday nights, we'd have a camaraderie night at a bar in Manhattan Beach, Ponchos, that was a lot of fun, and we'd all hang out. But other than that, Steve Berline, Mike Dial, Andy Parker, there was quite a, Bruce Wilkerson. We'd meet at a club or something like that, or go to dinner. But most of the time I was off doing things with other buddies. I lived on the sand down in Hermosa, and it was just a whole nother world away from it. And I didn't have to put on the macho thing of just being a big tough guy. And, instead of strolling into some bar with, 10 other guys all weighing 300 pounds, I just enjoyed kind of just slinking into a corner with some friends and being a little more inconspicuous, and then get back up to football and do the thing with all the boys. And they didn't miss me and I didn't miss them, but there was always love, between all of us.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a job. How about the Coliseum, the fans, the Raider culture, the Davises, all that kind of stuff? Obviously it's a job. It's the team you're on and all that stuff. But, I mean, the fact that you were there for a good 7 seasons or so, obviously there was kind of a mutual like there, I guess.
Yeah. Yep. The thing I really am proud of, and it's almost more proud than I am of my NFL career, was the misting company that I brought to the Raiders to cool our sidelines that ended up turning into a pretty monstrous business that I incorporated when the team moved to Oakland, called it Cloudburst. And I landed one side of my business in about 1,500 Home Depots and Lowe's and Targets and Costco's. And then that was just using the house water pressure on a spigot outside to cool your patio off, or put them on the fans that we had on the sidelines and had them on aircraft carriers. I landed the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta. And this was all on my own with my partner. I brought in a buddy that could handle the books for me, or us. And I was out selling. And some good stories about that, and how I landed the Olympics over GE and Raytheon and a lot of other large companies, just treating people right, that came back to me tenfold. A guy was a shoe salesman and with the Raiders, and no one wanted to talk to him. He had this new football shoe, and he was the lone salesman, and I ended up taking his shoe and tried it in a game, and he was a hero with his startup company. And then coincidentally, 5 years later, I've got my misting company. I go to Atlanta, and turns out he is the decision maker for whatever equipment goes on the Olympic Stadium fields in all their venues in Birmingham, Alabama, and Miami, and Washington, D.C. at the soccer venues, and all over Olympic Stadium. He gave me the contract, and he said, because I treated him like with respect and believed in him, because I believe in you. And it was amazing karma that came back to me. And that's all from just treating people right. And that's a lot of the theme of my book, is the good stuff that comes back to you if you just treat everybody the same and treat them with respect and empathy and compassion. And that's where kind of the aggressively human thing came in.
Did you have any real sense that something like that could happen while you were playing with the Raiders, or were you sort of entrepreneurially thinking about stuff during the off season and that kind of stuff?
No, it's not something I'm thinking about. But if I see something and it makes sense, I massage it, and if it's interesting, start doing something with it. Where my wife and I traveled around the world a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, right before the pandemic. And we were going through Indonesia, and, it's kind of a funky topic, but people over there don't use the toilet. They squat in a hole in the ground in a good majority of the places. And the more I looked into it, physiologically, that is the best way to have a full elimination of your colon. And the more I looked into it, I ended up patenting a new toilet. And I call it the Courtesy 180. And so after this book starts mellowing out, I'm going to be out pushing it, which I've already done once, but I hold this patent out for the next 20 years. And it's ADA compliant, so wheelchairs can roll up to it. And it's got, the squatty potty where you step up and you put your feet up. Ideally, you want your knees above your hips to help open the channel. And so I've got this built into it, and you turn around backwards. It's the Courtesy 180. And so the flusher and the toilet paper and everything is right in front of you when you put your arms up on top of the tank instead of on your knees and, looking out into nothing. This is, it's totally unique, and it's a wide ranging patent. So I'm really covered for any toilet manufacturer. They can't bring anything into the States, and they can't manufacture anything within the States to send out or keep here.
You hear that, American Standard and Toto? You stay away, okay? No. So let me. All right. So what
I'm going to go to them. Those hopefully one of those will take a 10-year lease or buy my by my patent.
There you go. That's what we're looking for. So you mentioned Squatty Potty. All right, I'll bite. So not literally, but what is that competitor? Is it complementary? Is it inspiration? Is it patent potentially infringing? What?
No, it's inspirational. That's what inspired me. I got back and I started digging into why are they squatting, and then looked into the Squatty Potty and realized that lifts your knees up. So that's a standalone product. Mine's built. I have ramps built into mine.
Interesting.
And the toilet seat is wider for the bigger rear ends that are increasingly in size. It's got a pole on it for an older person or a handicapped person to grab a hold of and lift yourself up. It has handles on each side. It's trick.
Amazing. And this is really, so it's really an incredible story. You've got some really interesting career diversions and things that people would not have ordinarily imagined would be the next step.
Well, it's kind of get back to what I was saying earlier. It's if you see an opportunity, and it's not that I'm looking for opportunities. I'm very present wherever I am. I'm in there squatting. I'm very present to where I am. I'm not thinking about how bad I want to get out of here and get back on the beach and run down and get in the water or anything else. It's, why is it like this? This is so odd, but it's just staying very present. Like the misting system over in Palm Springs, it's nothing that I patented. I just found 1,000 different applications for it than cooling off some people in the desert at a restaurant. I sold it to plastic extruder plants that they make kayaks. They pour the molten plastic into a metal mold, and the quicker they can get that metal mold cooled and get that kayak dumped out and re-poured, boom, revenue starts going up. So we put them in coal mines to settle the dust. It just had them in Burlington Northern out in the heat in the desert, putting tracks or doing track maintenance. And now they've got an air conditioning system dropping it, 30 degrees right in front of it. Yeah, it's just the possibilities. It's just keeping an eye open and how can things be done better?
All right. Two last things that I want to reminisce with you about when you were present in those environments that we've glossed over. One is Survivor. Tell me about that story. How do you get onto that reality show in its 22nd season?
I had never seen the show. I was down at Fox Studio. I go down there a time or two a year and hang out with Howie and all the guys. Jimmy Johnson, the year before, had been on Survivor. And one of his guests was the lead casting director for the show. And she ended up talking me into trying out for the finals that had been it had been going on all year, breaking it down to the finals that were coming up in 3 weeks. I went to that. Long story short, I ended up in Nicaragua and lost 33 pounds in 31 days, and absolutely a miserable, wonderfully miserable time. One I would never trade again. It was just an awesome time. It was extremely difficult. You really find out who you are when you're starving. I had a whole new empathy and compassion for people that are starving and don't have enough to eat. After losing 33 pounds in 31 days, I came back with so much bacteria in my front tooth. My dentist pulled that out on my first visit. I said, this kills people in third world countries. It was, they called a couple years later, asked if I wanted to do it again, and I hung up the phone so fast. Not a chance, but I'm really glad that I just plowed through that door. I'd never seen the show, but all of a sudden it's this wacky idea. Oh, sure. Because one of my big things in life is never saying a woulda, coulda, shoulda. You hear a lot of people, damn, I wish I would have done that. It's just, I don't have one of those. I might run into a wall, or I might go down there and, lose a limb or some ugly thing happen, or lose a front tooth, or, spend a bunch of money on trying to patent something. And, my toilet may never happen, but, at least I gave it a shot and know that I gave it a shot, and it's sitting here and I own it for 20 years. So it's just, plowing through an open door if a crack opens. I can't recommend that more to everybody. I tell it to all young people. You got an opportunity, go. Even if you don't know what it is. I didn't know what I was getting into when we signed to the 96 Summer Olympics. I figured the Atlanta Summer Olympics, cool, we can handle Atlanta. Well, then we get down there, and they're in Washington, D.C. and Miami and Orlando and Birmingham, Alabama. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And it was just Mike and I, my partner and I. So I recruited my brother, and he brought his dad and a couple other neighbors, and we were extremely successful. But just figure it out, but go. And it's just the same thing. I told a story about Tony Robbins walking on coals. He invited me out to a couple of deals, and I walked on the burning coals with him. And that whole philosophy is just once you decide to go, you take the first step and you keep moving. Otherwise, you're going to fall apart, burn yourself and everything else. So take the first step and go.
All right, one more pit stop, and then I want to ask you. We'll end up here with some thoughts, some parting thoughts about pro football and where that sort of sits today. But tell me about. We kind of glossed over it, but I'm just any recollections, any burning memories about the USFL, your time in Oakland with the Invaders. Did you know that it was going to wind up the way it wound up? All that kind of stuff. Obviously, the money was good, and nobody can blame me for jumping, because the USFL was certainly chock full of some great talent for sure for that short period of time.
Yeah, the year before I signed, oh my gosh, his name has slipped my mind. $40 million contract. The lefty quarterback with the 49ers, Steve
Young.
Steve Young. The year before, it signed a $40 million contract. It was just, and Trump owned a bunch of it, and he was throwing stupid money out, and that's kind of one of the things that ended up caving in the USFL. They just burned up all their money. But no one had any idea, at least I didn't, that they were going to be folding. It was just we were in the championship game, and we actually should have won that game, and
you scored a touchdown in that game, didn't you?
We did. I did not score a touchdown in that. No, I scored a touchdown in another game. Yeah, I played tight end.
In the season, I'm sorry. Yeah.
For one of the few times tonight, we'll see Doug Cozen, the tight end, on the wing on the right side. You see him down there. Now he's in motion to the left side. Fires into the end zone. Touchdown. The pass complete to the Oakland Invaders' Steve Wright. White, who lined up on the right side, caught the touchdown pass, and he is the second tackle this season for the Invaders to catch a TD toss. Ray Penny has a catch for 7, and now Steve Wright picks it up.
Wright, number 70, comes in short yardage, blocks for a moment on the linebacker to make him think run, then slips off. Just a little dump pass. That's probably a great thrill. He's a backup offensive lineman. Penny plays the other end, and he scored this year also, as you've indicated.
20-7 now, the Oakland Invaders lead, and you see the smile on Steve Wright's face. He's going to be, I bet you they rag him all the way back to Oakland if this game goes to Oakland's favor tonight.
He's going to go over and give Carter some advice here in a little while.
Here comes Boyovich looking for his 25th consecutive PAT. The kick is up, and the kick is true, and the Oakland Invaders lead the football game thanks to that Wright touchdown reception.
Yeah, I played tight end during the season. Yeah, always on short yards and goal line in every team I ever played on. But it was nothing really specific. It was again a lot of fun, but it was inferior. I don't want to say that word. It was.
Well, wait a minute. I was going to ask you about the quality of play. I mean, do you think it was not NFL quality?
Yeah, Reggie White was there. I didn't play against him there, but Reggie White. There was quite a few studs. Herschel Walker, Sam Mills, quite a few other big names that ended up coming to the NFL. But no, I was pretty content to hang there because I didn't really know what was next. So I was content just to hang in the USFL for the next, finish up my 3-year contract.
And what happens to that contract when the league goes away? Because so does everything. Didn't you have to wait a year? You waited a year to go back to the NFL, right? Do you have to do that, or did you choose to do that?
No, I had to do that because it was just different seasons. But no, I did not. that once the league folded, they were out of money.
Yeah, well, and there goes that sort of career stop. But I mean, luckily for you, it all wound up with a great sort of a kicker or a nice exclamation point with the Raiders.
I'd sure like to, before we take off, just mention the aggressively human.
Yeah, well, let's do that, and then I want to get your your thoughts about the NFL and that kind of stuff, and then we'll get all the promotional stuff. So
whatever you want to do, it's your show. I'm just I'm just a guest.
You've been great. I'm sorry. So why don't we do this? Let me get your sense of where we are with the NFL and pro football and stuff, because I'm sure you've got some opinions about. Sure. Player safety, the quality of play, that kind of stuff, and then we'll let you promote the hell out of the book.
I do. It's I don't watch football really anymore until it gets to the playoffs. The weak penalties for touching a quarterback, for a hold. It's just the game has changed from my years. And I'm not trying to be one of these tough old guys, but the game is pretty boring now to me. From the guys that, guys are built to blow people up, and yet the equipment hasn't changed. I did a little PowerPoint on how the equipment hasn't changed since the 60s. It's the exact same equipment. The material has changed, but there hasn't been any additions. As an owner, to not have his $10 million offensive tackle or guard or center not wearing knee braces, and bodies, all 300-pounders are flying around in there, and he's not going to be wearing knee braces. I wouldn't allow him on the field. It's basically NASCAR without wearing your seat. You can wear your seatbelt if you want to, but you don't need to. The injuries are just, self-made. They don't. There is ways to. I'm not promoting the knee braces for everybody, but for sure for the interior line. But, it's just you got all these guys that are built to destroy. And so why not build the equipment? Why not add additional equipment? Why not protect the game a little more? It affects so many people. Say if Steve Wright goes out of the game, I'm the starting right tackle and a 5-time Pro Bowler, and there's a lot of jerseys in the stands wearing number 66, right? And I'm not going to play the rest of the year because somebody fell on my knee. I had knee braces. I wore knee braces all through college for every game, for practice and the pros and all my games. I went through probably, half a dozen or more knee braces. I would bend them and I'd come off to the side, throw a new one on, and I was good to go. My knees are great. It's the game has changed too much. Then you got, out of a 3-hour and 12-minute game, you've got 11 minutes of action. I understand why rugby players and soccer players go, oh my Lord, how can you watch this? And just the incessant commercials, and, there's an hour-and-a-half feed leading up to games. It's just, it just kind of turns me off, actually. If I do watch a game, I'll just watch the interior line, watch a guard and tackle, how they're playing, and, working with stunts. But yeah, that's my feeling on the NFL. It's the game just is really weakened. They're not taking advantage of these guys that can bench press 600 pounds and do everything else. Run a 4.7 flat and weigh 350 pounds. They're not taking advantage of, and they're not making the game better. They're really weakening the game, in my opinion.
No, sure, no, and that's why I ask, and we've asked this of Larry Zonka and a lot of other players. As we go, Ron McDowell back in the day, we talked to. There's a whole bunch of various issues, but I guess the last question on that front would be this, right? So you're mentioning the current use or misuse, perhaps, of the players and the equipment and the current injuries and stuff. But what of the lagging injuries? What about players that you played with? I mean, obviously, it sounds to me like you're in relatively good health, right? Which is maybe a blessing, given the violence and the lack even of protection even from back in that day. But how about some of your colleagues on the football field? Have they been similarly unscathed, or are you more of an exception rather than the rule?
I'm a little bit more of an exception. I've got a good section about that in my book, but I mean, just one of my teammates with the Raiders, guard Kurt Marsh, he was on 60 Minutes they amputated his from his shin down. He had broken bones in there and wanted to stay in the field and kept shooting it up, and the bones were grinding, and ended up he was in so much pain. I had other guys. I was the first one in the Raiders to wear a plastic shield over my eyes, and everybody made fun of me. And a couple of years later, Don Mosbar, the Pro Bowl center for the Raiders, had a fingernail slash his eye, and he went blind in that eye and ended up, having to retire. I've had friends roll over in their car that I didn't think drank, that were so drunk they flipped their car and died. I had other teammates blow their brains out. Mike Weiss, who was a defensive tackle when I got to the Raiders, and he got cut and went up to his house up in Sacramento and killed himself. And it's just, the stories I got tons of them.
Well,
yeah,
I'm going to get maudlin. Do you think the NFL is doing enough to, or do we even recognize, frankly, some of the things? I mean, with CTE and all that stuff, it just feels to me that the more business-like it's become and more big business it's become, and it just seems to me like there are some further hidden things that are just not sort of, it's worrisome to me, and I'm just a fan.
Yeah, it's coming, but it is improving, and it's turning around an oil tanker in a stream. It's just it should happen a lot faster. I just got the biggest bug of how the equipment hasn't changed at all, as players have gone from an average of 240 pounds or 50 pounds on the offensive line. When I was with the Cowboys in the early 80s, you got fined if you were over 275 pounds. And then the Hogs came in 83, and so everyone went up to 300 pounds. And then, it's just the amount of, supplements and nutrition and lifting and knowledge and just I'm watching evolution. These guys getting bigger and stronger. And the equipment, there's a helmet, there's shoulder pads, there's, thigh pads, and, it's roughly about it, and some tape. And why not make these guys almost like a RoboCop? There's equipment out there that you could do this. The special forces have gone from big, heavy knapsacks to, night goggles, and changed all their equipment, and they can move fast, and they've got the spring-loaded, I forgot what they call them, skeletal systems for the legs so they can run faster, and, start taking advantage of this and make the game super violent, but at the same time, make it 10 times as safe. I envision a wide receiver being able to stretch out over the middle to catch a ball and get in a helmet right in the ribs, but he's wearing a flak jacket that's built even better than the quarterbacks wear. And this guy would flip up and down, and he hangs on to the ball and jumps up, and he goes back to the huddle, and he's fine. It is possible, and it starts with small steps of at least, start suiting up the trench with all the big bodies falling on each other. So, I don't know. I got a lot of thoughts on that.
All right, mighty thanks to Steve for that delightful conversation. And the book is equally delightful. Again, it's called Aggressively Human, Discovering Humanity in the NFL, Reality TV, and Life. It is co-authored with his lovely wife, Lizzie Wright, and it can be found on Amazon or wherever you find good books. And if you go to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, search up this episode number 326 with Steve Wright. You'll find a bunch of convenient links to all the various formats and editions of this book, and you'll be whisked away to Amazon to get it. We'll get a couple of shekels of referral love. We appreciate that. It is published by Kohler Books, and it is available not only in hardcover but also paperback version. There is a Kindle version as well. And if you'd like to listen to Steve read aloud his audiobook version. You can do that too via Audible. All those links will be found on Amazon and through our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Real interesting stuff. And it's not just about the various stops in the NFL and the USFL, but also his exploits with the Survivor Series, and as well as founding and running a cooling misting company, literally right off the back of his NFL experience and his football career. And just really interesting stuff, and a really interesting guy. And it was great to meet and discuss, and frankly, check off a few boxes of our eternal quest to kind of have completism here about teams and leagues no longer with us. Our thanks to the great Jerry Payne Audio Excellence. Of course, thank you for the knob twiddling, as always, kind sir. Let's see, you can follow us online or on your mobile device, whatever it is. Go to X/Twitter. You'll find us at Good Seats Still. You'll find us on Instagram at Good Seats Still Available. You will find us on Threads at Good Seats Still Available. You will find us on Facebook at Good Seats Still Available. And what else? You can send us email, by all means, hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. That's pretty easy. And that's all I got for you this week. We'll see you next week. Hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, and enjoy the football, everybody. There's plenty of it to be had. And until next week, we enjoyed your company for sure. And we wish you safe travels wherever you might go this holiday season. Bye-bye.